and I'm going to move forward with it and just think about the good stuff to come, whether it's feelings of gratitude for the things that you do have. I mean, all of this, what I'm talking about, contributes to that inner joy that I think builds an individual's happiness.
If you are stressed out, overwhelmed business owner, mom, or caregiver, or if you know of someone on the autistic spectrum who is overwhelmed and stressed out, then this is an absolute must listen episode. Who I'm speaking to in this episode is Mandi Freger, and she is a behavior specialist, energy psychologist who has provided decades of psychotherapeutic treatment to various populations. And she's now specializing in those on the autistic spectrum and caregivers of people on the autistic spectrum. And she really teaches us in this episode some great tips and tools on how to address the overwhelm and the anxiety and that fight and flight response. She's telling us a little bit about how to use energy psychology and the techniques in behavioral therapy to positively impact our day and find happiness and be more successful in terms of how we interact with other people and support other people. I highly recommend this episode. Check it out, and please join me in welcoming Mandi Freger. Hello, and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn McCarthy, and today is going to be a great day because we have with us an exceptional, wonderful human being who's making some really great strides in behavior psychology, supporting so many people in so many ways. I'd love you to welcome Mandi Freger. Welcome, Mandi. We're so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today.
I'll tell you what drew me to you were all the great things that you're doing in terms of supporting such a varied group of people in terms of anxiety and stress and overwhelm. And it seems to me that this has kind of been your mission throughout your profession, is really trying to find support for people in that regard, in terms of finding their happiness, finding their comfort zone, finding where they excel. How did your journey in your profession start?
Yeah. So my journey was a long one. And it was one of these that when we talk about successful spirit in a little while, I think you'll see a lot of themes in the chapters that people have just sort of been given opportunities that weren't expected or fell in their lap, so to speak. And my journey was kind of like that. I really set out to be in the medical field, and life circumstances didn't work out. And I literally was dropped into a position with one of the leaders in the field in energy psychology. And I didn't know it at the time. And so I didn't know anything about energy psychology. What is that? And then I learned, and it came very natural to me. So that was a driving force for me about what I wanted to do, because I think most people, and I deal with this in my personal counseling sessions all the time, that most people come to me in their 20s and aren't really sure what they're supposed to be doing with their life to find happiness or their career. And, I kind of tell them an unconventional suggestion that it's really kind of not that important, that you nail it down. And so I lived with that direction. And I remember this mentor of mine who was the leader in the field with energy psychology. One of the first conversations he had with me, he said, "What's your 5 or 10 year plan?" And I just looked at him and I said, "I don't have one." And I'm still very close with him today. And I joke about that with him all the time. I said, "Hey, remember that 5 or 10 year plan? I still don't have one." And so that's, I'll get into that in a little bit, but that's how I live my life and staying present. And it's not that we don't have goals, but, making life a checklist is not what I was about even back then. And I didn't realize I was already resonating with the vibration of, the energy psychology field, enlightenment, happiness. I didn't realize it back then. And let me just change gears and talk about clinical treatment back then too. It was really about, I always say, digging yourself out of the hole, getting better, getting out of, I'm so stuck. I'm so, completely under, and I'm feeling so anxious and depressed. And now we're seeing such a shift, I think, with media is really helping this to say, hey, listen, it doesn't have to be about just digging yourself out of the hole. We can get better. We can be happy. Let's strive for this. This is something that we can do. It takes work, but we can do it. So my journey kind of went that way. And then I fell into work with autism spectrum disorders, which I really didn't think I would ever be doing. Again, very sudden and unexpected. And I learned a heck of a lot from this population and some leaders in the field, also from Cleveland Clinic, that supported me and trained me in traditional therapy techniques. And so I blend them together. I blend the energy psychology techniques and behavior modification to really help people, individuals, really explore who they are and understand what motivates them. And then in turn, what makes them happy.
You know, it's so fascinating to me. I've got so many questions. Number one, what is energy psychology?
Yeah, energy psychology is really a family of, we say, mind body approaches, to make it simple. And the thing that any of these tools have in common, and there's a lot of different techniques under this umbrella of energy psychology tools, and they all have in common the piece that we are looking inward to our physical sensations, our discomfort, our good feelings that are stored in our body, in our central nervous system, and how they connect or are related to our thoughts in our mind. So often in traditional therapies, we're looking at the mind, we're looking at feelings, we're looking at thoughts, and we don't so much address how to extinguish or release the feelings in the body. We know that they're there. Oftentimes, for a therapist who might not be using energy psychology techniques, a patient might come in and they might say, you know what, I'm worried about work all the time, and I have stomach aches all the time. And I don't know if it's something physical or if it's just stress related. And we tend to sort of, I say, stay up here and process and look at, the feelings and explore all, the problem solving and all that. And then we hope that will sort of change the feeling in the body. You can do it that way. The energy psychology techniques are a little bit more efficient in being able to address sort of the bottom-up communication and extinguishing what's in the body. So the other thing that these techniques are really great for is sometimes, especially kids, will come in and say, my stomach hurts all the time, my stomach hurts, and they can't, or they don't have the capacity yet to vocalize what's going on emotionally. And that, well, gee, I was thinking about this and this and this. They're just not there skill-wise. And so we can just say, okay, just focus on your tummy ache, and let's do some technique here and see what happens. Oh, my tummy ache's gone. And kids are easy because their worldview is limited. So they don't have a whole lot of anticipatory worry and, create these, futuristic narratives like we do as adults. So these techniques are a little bit faster, I would say, than traditional techniques. I still incorporate some of that traditional talk therapy type of stuff, and it depends on the person. I'm also a therapist who, when someone comes to me, I really try to look at them, one, holistically, and two, individually, to see what they need. And I think that is a good ethical practice in any treatment, but it's especially is under the umbrella of energy psychology. Just because I use tapping doesn't mean that every single person wants or needs tapping. It may not resonate with them. In fact, I've had people that say that's not for me. And I say, okay, well, let's find something that does work for you, because being happy, feeling good is about perception anyway.
Oh, I love that. And that's so unique to each of us, as you mentioned, So what other techniques are there other than tapping? What are some other techniques that fall under the energy psychology?
So many, under the energy psychology umbrella, basically, I explain to people there's techniques that fall within treatment of using the acupuncture meridians.
Okay.
So usually those are the tapping ones, or you can just touch them. So there's a lot of techniques that use the meridians. There's chakras, or energy centers in our body too. So there's ways to address those energy centers, whether, we balance them or do some other tool to bring some mindfulness to those. And then we can work with the biofield, which is basically our energy field that extends, some feet out from our body. I think that this one is the most fascinating. We have the least research on this and the most in the tapping therapies. But to me, this one's critical. And this one's critical especially because we're around other people. because guess what? Our field affects everybody else, and ours is also influencing. And this is so important to me for especially the people that I work with that are either coming to me because of issues in the home or family stressors or work stressors or relationships, because right, we're all in those people's fields. And when I start to explain this in a practical way, like for example, I'll say to someone, have you ever been around somebody that's in a good mood and they lift you up? They're saying the right things. They're using their words, they're using all the cognitive tools, but you just feel like good around them. And I say, yeah. And then you have, what we would call the Debbie Downers, if you're an SNL fan, right? And it's like, okay, it's like, right. And they just feel so draining to me and this person, whatever. So I think it's a cognitive phenomenon, but it's also an energetic phenomenon with what we're actually giving off, how resilient our own field is to either say, yeah, I'm going to receive that, or no, not so much, holding our own, so to speak, and how much we're actually overextending or giving out our energy to other people that will come at a cost. And so I think that the field idea is of the three, the one that I have the most consistent conversations with, and because it's the more practical way of understanding, our place in space with respect to those around us and other energies around us.
Yeah. And there's a certain responsibility of your own energy as well, taking care of yourself. I mean, do you agree with me?
I love that you said that about the responsibility. Yes, yeah. I clearly think that that's something that comes with, again, being present, which, we're all on the being present bandwagon, right? You hear that no matter where, but that is part of being present, is that accountability and responsibility to others around us. And some people feel that they have a responsibility to other people, and some people don't. Some people have never thought about it, quite frankly. And I think, again, that comes back to the pace of life today. And we're just operating at such a high speed and one thing after another that we really haven't had time to take a step back and think about any of this. So, yeah, so it's very, I put the energy psychology principles into very practical use, and they seem to really make sense to people when we talk about their individual situations with that framework.
Absolutely. It's so interesting because I think on top of that, we've also told ourselves over generations and from our parents and from society that it's selfish to take care of yourself. It's selfish to take time out for yourself. It's selfish to focus on feeling good for yourself. And we're constantly giving to others and sacrificing ourselves for others or martyring ourselves for others. And what you're talking about is really understanding the value and the responsibility you have for taking care of yourself so that you put the good things out there, so that you're not negatively impacting other people, but you're actually caring for others by taking care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I speak to generational differences often because there have been very clear-cut differences in how we've, especially in America, how we have generated expectations of life from a survival mindset to a thriving mindset. And this thriving mindset is relatively new, really 5-ish, 10-ish years. And again, the media, I think, has been a big proponent to that. There might have been patches of people thinking this way, but really the messages weren't able to be shouted from the rooftop, so to speak, loud and clear. So again, working out of the whole, just kind of working ourselves to death was sort of that work ethic, pull yourself up, by the bootstraps and work hard. And that's, a big part of life. I mean, if you think about really where that came from survive.
Yep.
We need to survive. And this also factors into a little bit of polyvagal theory, which is fight, flight, and freeze. I'll just say it that way for the simplicity of the show. And I also speak that language to a lot of my clients. That mechanism, our amygdala, fighting and running and freezing, was not designed for consistent use all the time. And we find ourselves with this pace of life, being that elevated all the time. And it's not healthy. So whether it's working yourself to death, whether it's not me, everybody else comes first, it's that mechanism that really is the driver. And this is where it's important, I think, to swing back to behavior modification. So people can examine their own patterns with this and start to recognize, wow, I'm way too up. I don't need 4 cups of coffee to feel like I'm effective. This is one of my younger clients coined this phrase, and I use it all the time. It's my brain playing tricks on me.
Yeah.
I don't need to stay up that way. And so with this shift, and then even with family lifestyle and home lifestyle shifting to, we had traditionally, right, a 2-parent household, and one worked and one took care of the kids. And then, we both kind of go into the workforce, and then now we're working from home and we're doing all these blended things. Kids are in school, they're home, everything is different. In the past 20 years, things have really changed quickly. And there just hasn't been a lot of time to adapt, or there was no manual for the change, right? How do we deal with this? And unfortunately, a lot of people find themselves trying to keep, especially their kids, occupied with a device or TV, and then that again creates and maintains and really trains the brain to stay this way. And so we need to pull that back. It's never too late. I tell people to retrain your brain. We know about neuroplasticity today, right? The brain is always able to rewire, make new connections. But I particularly like to work with the younger generation, the Zs, coming up with the teenagers and the younger 20-somethings, because they really are kind of like, hey, I don't know anything. Like, I'm lost. I don't even know about life, a direction. It's far gone are the days where I'm in college and know I have a major and I know what I'm doing and I'm moving on that. So they're very much more connected to that feeling, I find. And so they get that language. They get this energy psychology language. They get the fight, flight, and freeze, which when you frame it like that, they understand then moving toward happiness, how overextending exhausts them, and how they do have that responsibility to other pieces. So that's a cool population in general to work with for me. But again, it's never too late. I work with people of all ages. Lots of the people in fact, most of them are young professionals, which we can talk about that a little bit in business.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please, let's dive right into that, because one of the things that I find in very high achieving, successful, driven business owners is that they do have this commonality of overwhelm, exhaustion, just kind of being pushed to their limits, and also this eternal feeling of something's missing. You chase the success, you chase the outcome, and there's this constant nagging that just unfulfilled. So how do you advise your clients in that regard?
Yeah, one of the biggest things, and let me just backtrack, I think, to your last point in question, is really what is going to make you happy and why are you doing it? And this is that behaviorist in me, that behaviorism gets a bad rap, but it is certainly what, as humans, we function, under that mechanism, everything we do. And so why are you doing this? If a business owner is just doing something for the money, and we hear this often, this is going to be a hard sell as far as motivation goes. Motivation is the one thing that no one, I think, can really give a person until they find it themselves. And when you find the right motivation and it's strong enough, you can pretty much conquer anything if that motivation is high enough. So if someone's in love with their job, right, and they just want to keep working harder and harder, to me, that is more of let's regulate this amygdala, recognize when you're too much in fight, when it's time for you to take a break. This is not even to the happiness. This is digging out of the hole.
Yeah. When
can you take your vacation time? Well, I can't because I have this contract coming up and this, and this one's off and on vacation. Yeah. Okay. Well, you just need to do it. Yeah. The world needs to stop. And then actually interacting with their clients who have this mechanism, and it just places more demand. So it's sort of the higher in management and the more sort of corporate we get, to me, there's the corporate industry as a whole, not everybody, that as a whole has fallen into this bigger, better, faster, stronger kind of mindset. And really, I see some of the really good organizations pulling back now and saying, hey, let's take a breath. Let's slow down. Let's talk about leadership. Leadership, because leadership takes time, it takes effort, it takes mindfulness. We have to think about the people around us, talk about responsibility. And so I think that is a pleasant surprise. But I try to educate people really when they're dealing with other people in the workplace, that when they're being feeling like they're being attacked or somebody's being disrespectful to them, I try to help them understand that everybody's functioning up here. And it really has less to do most of the time with the person on the receiving end, that I just need to fight. And when I talk about fight and flight mechanisms, this doesn't necessarily mean fighting. I'm just going to use my voice and fight with you all the time. This can mean an overexpression of like sort of an overarching fight. So this can mean I keep pushing, I keep doing more. Flight can be something in its behavioral manifestation, as far as, I don't necessarily need to be literally running all the time, which some of my professional athletes feel like they actually have to keep physically moving all the time. But it can be, what's next? What's the next thing? I'm not comfortable being still. So each person has a different way that they might be expressing these, especially the fight and flight, in other aspects of their life. So I look at examining that with people in business too. And I am very mindful that the first thing they're probably going to all say to me is, I don't have time. Right? Time is of the essence. So there are things, depending on the person, that, you can shave off your schedule. For example, I work with a few clients now who say, I'm just over inundated with meetings, and I don't usually even have to say anything in these meetings. It's just, again, we kind of swing the pendulum in the other direction with leadership and teammates. We want everybody to be part of everything.
I know.
And then it's sort of like, but this isn't really a valuable use of my time. It's not effective. It's just, taxing on my energy. So a couple of them have said, you know what, I don't need to be in these meetings, and I'm just going to put them off my plate. They've done it successfully, felt good about it, didn't feel like they were missing anything. And it's like, hey, life goes on. So it's very individualized, I think, what I recommend for my business and corporate people, on what path they might go on to help slow down their lifestyle a little bit with respect to business, and how they obtain that work-life balance. Now, we hear that all the time in the media too.
Oh yeah, this is the magic thing that everybody's after.
It's the magic thing. However, I was just actually listening to one of your old podcasts, and I believe the woman was saying that, her work filled her up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not so, I'm, I kind of see both sides of everything. I'm not so steadfast on work and life balance have to be equal. You have to have more. You have to figure out and work with a person, where is your cup full?
Yeah.
Right? Where is your cup full? And let's talk about that. If it's full at work, then maybe you're not as imbalanced. This is very individualized. And I also, this is a sidebar too, but I just have to mention this. We hear so much about positivity in the media too, and we have to be positive. There is something to fake it until you make it. But on the other side of that, it's not realistic, and we're human. So it is okay to have a range of emotions. Yeah. And I also find myself telling that to people when people feel like they have to do it.
I know.
And that's almost a frozen response, just because I'm supposed to look happy and positive all the time.
And fleeing from your emotions. It's that flight response. When you think you just have to be happy all the time, you're fleeing from actually being present with the emotions that you are feeling. So incredible. I loved when you mentioned how one of the strengths now in leadership is mindfulness, because that is a very new concept, but a very powerful one in terms of leadership, and not one that was really recognized for forever until very, very recently. So what does mindfulness in leadership mean to you?
Yeah, I think the practice of mindfulness starts, can start back. If we think about kids, right, and how we might try to teach our kids how to be considerate, I think would be the word, right? So if you have some time and space and, your child will say age, I don't know, 5 to 10, you're around some other people, right? Or a group of family members, what are you teaching them to do? People that are focusing on manners and courteous behaviors are saying, okay, did you speak to these people? Have you, engaged in some sort of interaction? Have you acknowledged them? What are you saying to them? What activities? Are you mindful of your place around them? If somebody's trying to pass by, are you aware of your surroundings? Are you paying attention? So if we think about just those basic tools, a lot of adults, quite frankly, are not thinking that way generally, because guess what? We're too fast paced and we're worried about the next thing, which keeps our focus super narrow. So just when I talk about mindfulness, again, I assess the individual to see at what degree of attentiveness, they feel like they're at, and if it's different for situations, but really just noticing and observing. There's also the phenomenon that, we're over talking and not listening. Right. So sometimes that can go a long way. That's my career. But even as a supervisor, sometimes leadership styles aren't necessarily, or people aren't flexible with that. And let me, again, just sidebar and say, so many skill deficits in leadership have to do with the fact that people tend to get promoted because they're good at their trade. So whatever the trade is it's like, you know what, you're a hard worker, this job, here's a position open, we're going to promote you. And so many times there's not effective managerial or leadership training. I'm going to say managerial first. That was sort of the old one. And then actually leadership training for these people. So it also almost sets them up for failure. I see this, quite frankly, in the nursing industry a lot. And this is really challenging, right? When the person's a hard worker, their fight and flight is pretty regulated for crisis. They can manage a lot of things. And then they get promoted. They still have this type of brain, but then they have to manage everybody else. I mean, to me, they're set up for a hard time with respect to being able to be present and look at the needs of your staff. I can check the check boxes like nobody's business, but to come back and stay present, we're working against a skill deficit that's not necessarily given or provided. And we're working against a brain that's fighting.
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know.
So it's really difficult when that skill is not there. So I find myself using this mindfulness concept sometimes just to give some basic communication tips and communication training, like listening, right? Well, maybe are you the type of manager that just, says directives, and maybe it's cut and dry for you. Maybe how does somebody else like to receive feedback? Maybe you have that conversation with them, and that goes a long way. So mindfulness can, again, get very specific to the individual and where they are in their training, and where they are at their level of awareness and their rapport with their employees, coworkers, co-managers.
Very cool. Yeah. And I can see how sometimes people can be set up for failure from the very beginning just because they don't have access to those skills training and learning how to be a good, mindful, effective leader. I can see that. So one of the things that I know that you do is you work with a lot of patients who are on the autism spectrum. And how does your therapy change, or does it change when you're working with patients who are on the spectrum?
Yeah, this was a population I never expected to work with, and it's probably my favorite now. It has been, but it is. I actually assimilate a lot of not only the behavior modification, but what I learned about cognition and how people think and what we call executive functioning, from what I learned from this population. And still every day they're teaching me something. I have a wide range of ages. I've worked with kids as young as, infants and toddlers to adults who actually haven't been diagnosed, who are maybe older and approaching geriatric because we just didn't diagnose it back then. But what I've learned is, the way that their minds think, there's patterns because of the way their brains are different. But it's also helped me to sort of back up to my clients who I use this term non-spectrum spectrumers and those diagnosed, just to have a line with who's been clinically diagnosed and who hasn't. There's an array of different brains, no matter how you look at it. So I don't make assumptions about, okay, you have a spectrum disorder, so your brain is like this, or you're a non-spectrum disorder, so your brain is like this. I think about executive functioning. I think about how do you attend? How do you plan? How do you problem solve? How is your memory? How do you assimilate all of these tools? And how does that drive how you function in life?
Okay.
So this is the piece that I really learned to master with this population. And it's pretty straightforward with them. And they're actually there's a big myth about people diagnosed with spectrum disorders that they don't have emotions. That's completely not true. But why they might have an emotion is a little bit less complex, I find, than why we do. We tend to put a lot of different pieces of experience together to create a narrative that could be the worst outcome. When we're looking at a brain of a person who's diagnosed with a spectrum disorder, their worst outcome might come from tangible, concrete experiences that they've had that might be the same. For example, if I'm going to Europe, and the last time I was in Europe, I broke my arm, even if it was an activity or a fluke or something that I'm not going to be doing. If I go to Europe again, I'll break my arm.
Got it.
So there's a straightforward connected fear rather than attributing a whole lot of other types of the way that our brains compensate and devise all these other protective mechanisms are pretty, and they can be covert, and that what might be a little bit hard, but the energy tools can help that. Whereas this population is a little bit more straightforward and direct, and the antecedents appear to be a little bit more clear cut for me anyway. I remember
does that also mean that they're more entrenched? Is it more difficult to tease that out of there because it's so clear? Sometimes when we have these fears or these concerns, they're more ethereal and they're a little bit loose. So you can almost tease them away, or I would think in terms of a therapeutic treatment, you'd be able to tease them off a little bit and show your client how they don't line up. But with patients who are really convinced of the inevitability of breaking their arm in Europe, is that more difficult to pull that out of that mindset?
Not for me.
Yeah.
It is. It
Okay.
would be. So here's where and this is, part of my journey is to coach, which and a lot of other things that I'm doing is to coach and encourage other outpatient therapists to really be a little bit more courageous in working with this population, because a lot of them can come across as, I'm just going to use the word demanding, rigid. But again, if we step back from that and understand what that mechanism is, it's not directed at me or you. It's the insistence on sameness is the way that their brain works. So for me, it's a matter of matching the clear cut with a new experience. And sometimes they just have to go through the experience again, and the same thing doesn't happen. And then it's like, yeah, okay, I'm over it. So in that way, sometimes it's actually easier. Because it's like, oh yeah, I went to Europe again and I didn't break my arm. And so like, I'm never going to worry about breaking my arm again because it didn't happen that time. Whereas we might say, oh, but I did this one time. I don't know. I remember it. Am I just worried about something else? Is it this? Or am I just nervous about getting married? Like, what is it? Is it all these other pieces and layers? And, to me, it's just two different ways of approaching the problem. But that's the art about what I do and what therapy, I think, brings to the table. If you really love and are passionate about what you do, you really look at each individual as an individual. What do they need? What do they respond to? How does the brain work? Diagnosed or not?
You know, you touched on there what we had mentioned briefly, and that is the successful spirit. And the successful spirit in terms of, what do you love? What speaks to you? What's calling to you? And if you really love what you're doing, then you're going to look at it a little bit differently. So tell us a little bit about how you interpret that term, the successful spirit. As some of my audience members know, there's this phenomenal book coming out imminently this summer called The Successful Spirit. And you are an author on this book, Mandi. So tell us your interpretation of what the successful spirit is.
Yeah. So when Eric approached me about doing the chapter, I instantly thought, I saw everybody else who was going to be asked to do this. And I'm like, I'm probably going to have I'm always sort of the outlier as far as what I'm talking about. And I'm like, yeah, I have an idea for this, but it's going to look like an outlier. And in hindsight, I think I was a little bit correct about that a lot of the people who have authored chapters are really talking about their journeys, right? And their personal spiritual evolution, maybe not necessarily religious, but their own self, care regimens, their own growth, their own trials and tribulations of what they've gone through. And I took a little bit of a different angle with this because one, I don't know that we're all there. We're aspiring to be there, but people out there reading the book may be at all different levels of development with their growth. Okay. And so I took a very practical approach, and I tried to conceptualize what I hear the most from my clients in treatment. And it's sort of a basic 101. How do I find happiness? And I said this at the beginning of the show today, and I'll repeat it as many times as I need to, that it's about slowing down and being present. We can't jump from happiness, to digging ourselves out of the hole to happiness, on a checklist or on a time frame. And that's another thing. I think we're conditioned with time frames and checklists, and just starting to work with throwing those out the window as much as possible. Yes, we all have things to do and responsibilities, but what can we shave off our plate? If we got to this point that we need me time all the time, what led us to that point? Have we overextended ourselves to everybody else that we need to pull back and say, what's realistic and doable? Has this gotten to the point where we're almost in codependent relationships, over giving? And this is where that energy field concept comes into play, where I do everything for everybody. Well, is there any reason that they can't do this for themselves? Can we start to put some limits on that? So these are really the foundational steps for being able to get to this happiness and self-care. I think about maybe some people coming into therapy for the first time, looking at, some of the people who spend a lot of time in meditation in the day that still run a successful business and, have got this practice down. And I say to them, your life isn't going to look like this overnight. This is a lifestyle. This takes work and it takes commitment, but you have to want to do it, and if you don't want to do it, that's motivation, and that's okay. Let's work with what you can give and do. And that's different for every person. So I think that that's a good message for, the common person, the common American out there who says, I'm not going to be a professional athlete. I'm not going to be like, yes, and that happy all the time. How do I take small steps? And it really just starts from within. And what can I do to make my life a little bit more peaceful? And can I just bring some awareness to attention? Can I bring this down a couple of notches? And one of the things that I say in the chapter too is, as much as media can be good and informative, social media can be very damaging for a lot of people because we attach emotion to that. And we tend to bring that back to us as a reflection about who we are. And that's another thing that I work with in session a lot. Like, if you're going to look at social media, why does that person's opinion or that person's lifestyle reflect upon you? That's them, right? So we need to sort of make these transitions. I mean, quite frankly, a lot of people just decide to sort of move away from it and take breaks for a little bit.
Yeah.
But is much good that can come again with media and technology. There are a lot of things that our minds do to create, narratives about what we see and what that means for us.
So what I hear from you is the secret to a successful spirit is taking moment to be present with yourself. taking time away from the busyness to just be present with yourself and ask yourself those deep questions of, what do I want? How do I find happiness? What does feel good to me?
Yeah. And it may not be about, I have to just scrap my whole entire life right now and start over.
Right.
There are smaller steps. I mean, and that's actually more realistic to just take smaller steps. One of the things I usually do with my clients is I use a couple different breathing exercises, but they're integrated breathing exercises to help the brain. They're not just deep breathing, but I also have them do it either in the morning or at night. And what they start to do is they start to, wow, I can just finally quiet my mind just to do this. So it's sort of, a win-win to do this type of breathing exercise. It is helping organically, we think, deactivate this amygdala, this heightened state, but it also starts to empower people that, hey, this can be done. I can quiet my thoughts, and I have a tool to learn how to do this now.
Yeah.
So it does give momentum then to say, I can do this more and more. What if more of my day was like this? What if I could quiet my mind more often than not? Can I function like that? And that's a transition and sort of loss, if you will, too. I think I mentioned earlier about, caffeine. A lot of us are really dependent on caffeine, and we think that makes us more effective. But it really, what I see with my clients, is just causes sleep disturbances for the most part, because we're over caffeinating. And then it also impedes, for a lot of people, that ability to slow down and actually be present, because it makes us sort of jump to the next thing and the next thing. So even caffeine regulation is an area of work for a lot of people, but it's something simple that even if, people try to cut down by half and say, hey, I can still do this. If I, try to take some time to just decompress, just because I'm decompressed doesn't mean that I'm asleep. And again, that's this phenomenon. When our brain is up this high, it almost feels like we're completely ineffective for a while. So this is a process, and that's my message to the average person, that this can be done. You have the right therapeutic match. And I've said this probably on every podcast I've ever done, but therapy isn't always just about digging yourself out of the hole. It is about self-improvement and self-growth. So if you would like to improve something about yourself, if you can seek out a good therapeutic match who works on this end of, building spirit, being successful, being happy, and you can still get a lot out of the sessions.
Absolutely. So Mandi, what is your definition of happiness?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever answered that question before. Happiness is so personal, but I really think that happiness, I don't know that this answers your question, but I think it has to come from within. 100%. The other conversation I have with a lot of people is that this makes me happy, that makes me happy, that person makes me happy, doing that makes me happy. That's okay. But if you really want to test your level of self-love, can you be alone? Can you be alone without all of that and still find an inner chuckle? Like, to be honest, I don't know that I've ever said this publicly before. I laugh to myself all day long. I mean, this is really how I am, and it's probably annoyingly silly to some people, but I find things right in my own mind, or just simple things that I'm going about my day that, I'm in this practice anyway. So this isn't necessarily for the common person, but I'm practicing when I preach. I'm doing my exercises with my clients all day long. So I find these things that are just simple and just funny, and they sort of, bring me up a little bit. Do I have to have something around me? Not necessarily. It's whatever I stumble across. So this happiness is really, a feeling of joy that really just continually comes from an inward focus about being content with who you are, feeling good about your daily life. It doesn't even have to be about your 5-year plan or everything I've accomplished. Do I feel good today? Did I do what I wanted to today? Do I not feel so great? And then being gentle with yourself. Everybody has bad days too. I have to say that, it's not perfect for me every day, but if I have a bad day, I don't harp on it, right? It's just like, so an energy therapist would say, okay, we had a bad day. I'm going to forgive and give myself some love like I would anybody else or my kids, right? And I'm going to move forward with it and just think about the good stuff to come, whether it's feelings of gratitude for the things that you do have. I mean, all of this, what I'm talking about, contributes to that inner joy that I think builds an individual's happiness.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. I love all of your great reflection, because I think so many people can acknowledge or at least identify with so many aspects of what you're saying. And especially one of the things that I know you're doing, you're in the middle of writing another book that's guiding specifically caregivers in terms of finding success and happiness in what they do. And are these some of the techniques that you're also talking about with caregivers? Because I think caregivers have this added obligation to their patients or their clients. And so that can also start feeling very heavy and onerous in terms of finding happiness.
Yeah, the book is specifically for caregivers of those diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders, but the model actually incorporates energy psychology practices that can extend to a lot of different areas.
Okay.
This particular population, there's a lot we're not saying about, if we're going to be real, about parents who have kids diagnosed with spectrum disorders. You know, in the world today, you know, we're really trying to look at, you know, equal rights, and everybody should have a say and be heard, and, you know, and absolutely. But the reality is some of the way that these kids' brains work, we have to do some extensive training to be able to get them to assimilate a little bit better into society, to be able to produce in society. And so I know that, again, some people will say, you know, that's just your opinion. The parents that come to me that want treatment for their kids want that for their kids. They want them to be able to be independent with daily life skills. They want them to be able to hold a job. They want them to be able to successfully have, you know, some type of relationships or know how to navigate the community. And so with that, you know, I tend to attract parents, right? What do you think that does to the brain, right? We have to work harder. We have to do the next thing. We have to, right? These parents are highly effective with their kids, highly effective. But over time, what happens is, right, they're exhausted. And then again, I'm just going to be real, come the feelings of guilt and resentment. Not that I don't love my child. I am tired of doing this. And it
Absolutely.
really is.
And
fatigue.
then shame kicks in as well on top of it.
Yes, it's just fatigue. And when we start to look at this from a field perspective, often, especially moms, and it's just been my experience with the clientele that I've worked with, it's the moms that are usually taking the lead with the kids, that this idea, the field concept, they're holding their field almost all the time. So they're not even sure which energy is theirs, which is their kids. So we have to do a lot of work with that to recognize what's mine, what's theirs, how much of this am I taking on, how much am I like over prompting or over helping? Can I back out? And this changes with how the child grows. Like with any child, there's different stages of parenting when there's skill development. So I think really when the parent starts to understand this, I mean, my parents of kids of spectrum disorders are like 100, they're great at this. They're like, yep, I was in fight. I had to put in my bubble, like my bubble on. And I'm like, just have to say to my kid, I need a minute. You're going to be safe. You're fine. And I'm going to walk away. So
when you were saying they're holding their field, you mean holding their child's field for them the whole time. And that's where that misunderstanding is. Where does your field end and where does mine begin?
Yeah. And there's a lot more to it than that, but just again, for the sake of time. And I think if you're a parent, you realize that you're doing that for your kid at some point anyway. Anyway, so if you have a kid that can't maybe communicate as well as maybe your other children or other kids, or they can't get their needs met, you know, that's just going to be instinctual to try to anticipate those needs, which, right, just enmeshes your energy.
Right.
So this is where it really is imperative. Energy psychology techniques are great, but the parents really have to have a great understanding of ABA, behavior modification, and how to sort of break from this field dependency and use the words to be able to provide, you know, an infrastructure to that relationship versus just being unspoken all the time. That happens pretty often. Wow. So I'm excited about teaching some of what I'm about to teach in the book about how to recognize if there's a skill deficit with the person, like I'm not sure actually how to manage this behavior versus how much and at what point am I that I'm energized or I want to do this versus I'm just tapped out and don't want to. And then recognizing the energy field and how we can manipulate that and create some resilience to get the parents through. And the other thing that I think is a little bit different about this book than other references for caregivers out there is the time element. I'm super time sensitive. I mean, no one has a lot of time. And to tell a parent of a kid with a spectrum disorder that has other children also that you can take an hour a day and meditate, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So these techniques are quick. I think that they're going to be usable. Yeah.
That's great. So what is the title of this book? How can we keep an eye out for it? Do you have a title for it yet?
Yeah, From Exhausted to Energized, the Autism Spectrum Disorders, Caregiver's Guide.
Oh, that's really good. From Exhausted to Energized. And I think that's exactly what every parent, especially parents and caregivers of children and adult children on the autism spectrum, is looking for. How can I re-find that energized life, that energized space in my life? You just are doing some amazing things, Mandi. Thank you so much for all you contribute to this world. I'm so excited to know you and to have learned so much from you in this hour. Thank you. Well, I think I know the answer to this, but what do you think is your superpower, your gift in this world?
I've never been asked that question before either. I would say the flexibility to really embrace and utilize the art of the therapy technique. That's what I would say. I think flexibility and individuality has served me very, very well.
Fabulous. And what great skills for all of us to adopt, really, really. And, before I ask you the final question, I know that so many people are going to have so much excitement over this interview and have learned so much from you. How can they learn more about you and what you have to offer? Is there a place where they can visit? I know we'll put all your info in the show notes of this episode, but how can they find you if they have questions for you?
Yeah, my website is probably the most comprehensive. There's actually, I didn't talk a lot about this, but some of the research that I've done is also on, there's links to that. There's a couple with the energy psychology and a couple with behavior modification. Great. And so that's on my website. It's www, it's my name, mandifreger.com, MandiFreger.com. My links to the social media are on there. I would say if people are looking for, I mindfully created a whole bunch of YouTube shorts for about 5 minutes. So they were watchable and doable, but I hope that they're practical. I would say my YouTube channel is a good resource for those who want to learn more.
Awesome. We'll check it out. Now, my final question to you, Mandi, is those phenomenal YouTube shorts and your excellent website, which I highly recommend. There's some great resources on there. If all of this were to disappear, and you could be left with just knowing that for 30 seconds, we all have our headphones on and we're listening to a message from Mandi Freger. What message could you leave us with to inspire us to live this fulfilled and life full of happiness and joy? So what message would that be?
The first thing that comes to mind is pay attention and don't assume.
I like it. Pay attention and don't assume.
And don't assume. And I know, again, with our world of positivity and reframes, we want to have a reframe. We want to say, just pay attention. Don't put the don't in there. But I think it's hard not to. We don't want to be making assumptions. If we're paying attention and being mindful, we can look at things through a neutral lens. Our emotions trip us up. They cloud us a lot of the times, and sometimes not for the better. So if we say, oh, maybe it looks like that, but let me get some more information. I don't want to make the assumption based on a past experience or just my perception right now. So it's pay attention and don't assume.
And I love that in terms of relationships as well. Sometimes you get so comfortable in marriage or even with your children that you don't even try something because you assume how they're going to respond. You don't give them that respect to maybe surprise you. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your insights here with us today, Mandi. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And thank you to all of you for paying attention and being present for this, for this episode of The Business of Happiness. And I hope you continue to look up Mandi's inspiration on her website and also keep an eye open for the book that's imminently coming out this summer, 2021, The Successful Spirit. And you can read Mandi's chapter on how to find that successful spirit for yourself. Thank you so much. Today is going to be a great day. Bye-bye.